how back in the day, audio was pleasingly affected by tape, simulating the frequency response and saturation characteristics, but without all of the drawbacks associated with magnetic tape. Both frequency response and saturation of magnetic tape depend on several elements that all interact with each other, making it quite a complex process of interacting parameters rather than a Control A does X, Control B does Y. So let's take a look. Input gain changes the level of the signal prior to the emulation process. Increasing this increases the amount of saturation, but the level of saturation achieved is also dependent on the source material and the bias setting. Tape saturation is wavelength dependent, which changes depending on tape speed and frequency. The level of saturation is dependent on a very high frequency AC bias signal, and the level of bias affects the saturation's characteristics. Higher settings tend to limit the frequency range, and negative values boost the higher frequencies. Tape speed mainly changes frequency response, but also affects where different frequencies distort. As distortion is wavelength dependent, and wavelength is equal to speed divided by frequency, so a kilohertz signal at 15 inches per second will distort at the same level as a 2 kilohertz signal at 30 inches per second. The harmonics slider increases the amount of harmonics in the distortion.
Crave the happiness you think they bring.
Dips and peaks in the frequency response of tape machines, especially the lower frequencies, was known as head bump. The low emphasis slider controls the resonant peak of this head bump. Increasing this will add gain to base material.
I can't believe that's what you crave. It's quite a drug and money slave.
High emphasis compensates for the high frequency loss. Listening to the differences between some of the presets is a good way to learn how these controls interact with each other.
One night out, what do I see? Expensive champagne brings you to your knees. You don't know, what can I say? It's gone tomorrow.
And that's the vintage tape module. Great for adding some of the characteristics of tape to your mix.